Are dream characters conscious, as in with intentionality and point of view? Believe it or not, it's been studied. So imagine you're dreaming and you realize that you're dreaming and you're walking through an old city, say it's bustling with people. You go into this marketplace and you find a cart where they're selling vegetables and you start getting into an argument with the vendor. If you stop and think about that for a second, it's kind of a strange thing, because this person you're talking to and having an argument with is seeing things from their own point of view, and they're opposing yours, and you're having this debate. But what's really going on there? I mean, all of this stuff is happening inside your head, right? So what's up with that? So there was a researcher named Paul Tholey who actually researched this back in the 80s. And what he did is he took a bunch of lucid dreamers and had them do their thing, do the lucid dreams, and ask the characters that they encountered there questions to determine whether or not those characters had some kind of consciousness. So lucid dreaming is when you're aware that you're dreaming and you're able to stay in the dream. That's the only way that a study like this could be done. Now, granted, this is a difficult question because we're getting into some metaphysical issues here. How can I know for sure that someone else is actually conscious the way I am? Well, we can't know that for sure. But if we just set that aside and basically take it on the behavior level and see where it goes, it actually yielded some really interesting results. So what they were wanting to know was, when you encounter a dream character, do they just repeat stuff that you already know, or is it possible for them to show you or tell you something that you didn't know? Because that would really be interesting. So what he did, what Paul Tholey did, was he had his lucid dreamers pose 5 different types of questions to the dream characters that they encountered in their lucid dreams. So the first question they had them take a look at was, can you draw a picture for me upside down or from a different point of view? And many of them could do that. In fact, there was one interesting example of a dreamer who had a lucid dream about his girlfriend, and he asked her this question in the dream, and she wrote down 3ZWG, which he didn't know what that meant. Then he said, okay, let's try again. And she just said the word Lippenstrasse. Remember, this is a German study, so all this stuff was in German. Well, the dreamer didn't have any idea what any of this meant, and he woke up, although he wrote it all down. But 2 months later, he finally figured out what all that was about. At the time that he was doing the study, he and his girlfriend were thinking about moving to a 3-bedroom apartment. Now, somebody pointed out to him that 3ZWG is a standard German abbreviation for a 3-bedroom apartment. And Lippenstrasse was the street where he was living at the time. She was trying to convince him to leave that apartment and move in with her in a 3-bedroom apartment. So the interesting thing about that, of course, is that the dreamer didn't know any of that stuff, but the dream character seemed to have an understanding of what that was, and it was the dream character version of his girlfriend too. So kind of mysterious, kind of interesting. So there's a lot of answers like that, but it turns out that there were quite a few dream characters in the study that could draw pictures from other points of view. So the second task was to give me an unknown word, a word I've never heard of, and tell me what it means. So most of the dream characters encountered in the study could do that. And here's an example. So in one dream, the dreamer asked a unknown character to do this, and she said Orlog. And he said, okay, I don't know what that word means. What does it mean? And she said, it describes our relationship. But he said, okay, what does that mean? What does it mean? What did you mean by Orlog? Well, she comes back and says, I didn't say Orlog. I said charm. Well, they were debating this back and forth. Eventually, the dreamer woke up. And the interesting observation that Tholey makes here is that isn't it funny that the dream character is essentially lying? So that's something that he didn't expect to see in this study. The third task that the lucid dreamers were putting to their dream characters was, can you rhyme words for me? An example was a dreamer went up to a man and asked him, can you rhyme the word Tanne, which is a tree in German. Now, he had thought of a couple of words that rhymed with that in the dream state, but the dream character said Panne, which he hadn't thought of. Well, Panne in German means accident or misfortune. And when he was thinking about this, the dreamer in his dream report said, that reminded me of an accident I'd had a few days ago prior to dreaming this, where he got stranded on the road. Now, my question as I was looking at that was, could that have been in the dream lag effect time frame? Most likely it was. And if you'll remember, the dream lag effect is that between 5 and 7 days after you dream about something, there's actually an increase in likelihood that you'll dream about that event. So, who knows? But in general, dream characters could rhyme words that the lucid dreamer posed to them. The fourth task that they were to put to their dream characters was to create a rhyming verse about them. Now, if you look through some of the reports, they're pretty funny, because some of them, the dream characters would tell them to get lost or, that kind of thing. But when they did do it, they actually were able to cook up some pretty funny rhymes. And in fact, sometimes dream characters did it in other languages that the dreamers were not very familiar with. There wasn't any reports of anyone coming up with a language that they had no familiarity with. That would have been really remarkable. Also, it would have been really difficult for them to remember that. But anyway, in fact, one example was a child doing this. The dreamer asked a child dream character to do this, and the character did a rhyming verse, but made up a word to fit into the rhyme. So that was kind of funny. And then the fifth task that they had to do was to give dream characters a bunch of math problems, just basic arithmetic problems, to see how well they did. And it turns out they could do that, although sometimes the dream characters, particularly child dream characters, would come up with creative and unusual solutions to the math problems. So that was kind of funny. Another result, though they weren't looking for it, but they did notice it in the dream reports, was that if you were a lucid dreamer and you encountered the same character more than once, and if you had some kind of conflict with that character, the dream character remembered it and would try to avoid the dreamer by pulling the hood up or trying to evade the dreamer in various different ways. And they were pretty good at it too. So that was an interesting result. So in general, they did behave as if they had intentionality, memory, emotions of their own. So it's a pretty interesting result. So the interesting thing about all this is that it does reinforce our earlier point about the fact that dream characters and narratives are not constructed by the dreamer themselves, which means something else in the mind is. Now, I often tell my residents and students that I give lectures to, and other folks that attend my talks, that if that doesn't bother you, you haven't thought about it enough. Because it's really kind of spooky if you think about it. Something in there is conjuring up all these different consciousnesses that are not yours, and they have their own set of knowledge base. Presumably they're all drawing from the same, body, but who knows, right? So you'll remember that these were lucid dreams. Now, if you have any experience with lucid dreaming, you know that oftentimes you'll be dreaming without lucidity and then realize that you're dreaming, and then, in other words, that's you become lucid. Well, one interesting result from this study was that many of the dream characters knew that the dreamer was dreaming before the dreamer did. They would make comments or remarks or behave in a way that revealed that they knew that the dreamer was dreaming. Pretty interesting. So it's just another piece of evidence here that these characters have access to information that the dreamer, the dream ego, if you will, doesn't have access to for whatever reason. So this is yet another interesting reason to take a really close look at your dreams. But in all, it's still kind of mysterious what it all means. So if you have any idea what you think it means, answer below in the comments. Let us know what you think.